Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Sleep. We love creating unique content for you, but we need your support now more than ever. Our channel is facing some challenges, and we really need your interaction. If you enjoy what we offer, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our videos with your friends. Every comment, like, and share makes a huge difference. Let's grow together and keep bringing you the content you care about. Thank you for your continued support. Dr. Elias Mercer stood alone in his lab, fingers poised over the control panel of the time stasis device. It had taken him 10 years of work, a lifetime of obsession, and the quiet dissolution of his personal life to arrive at this moment. If the calculations were correct, he was about to steal a second from time itself. The machine hummed, a low thrumming vibration that resonated through his bones. A cluster of copper coils and dark vein tubing pulsed like the ventricles of an artificial heart. The display flickered. Ready. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. 1 second, he whispered, as if the words themselves might curse the attempt. He pressed the button. The world stopped. He felt it before he saw it. A shift in reality, a wrongness that pressed against his skull. The lab froze mid-motion, papers suspended in the air from the draft of the ceiling fan, the steam from his coffee hanging like glass. The sound of the humming machine had been replaced with an utter, crushing silence. Elias exhaled, feeling godlike. It had worked. Then he saw it. In the farthest corner of the room, something stood. At first he thought it was a shadow, cast by the dim fluorescence above. But shadows didn't have height. They didn't have shape. And they certainly didn't tilt their heads in acknowledgement. It was tall, impossibly thin and featureless, a vague smear of darkness with the suggestion of limbs. The longer he looked at it, the less defined it became, as if its presence was an argument against form itself. His pulse hammered. This thing, it hadn't been there before. Elias blinked. The world shuddered as time resumed. Papers fell to the desk, coffee splashed back into motion, and the low hum of the device returned like a deep breath being drawn. The figure was gone. Elias stumbled backward, his mind grasping for logic, for reason. He hadn't imagined it. He knew that it had been there, inside the stolen second, watching. Had he seen it? Or had it seen him? A cold sweat crept down his spine. He stared at the button, the machine, and the empty corner where the figure had stood. He should have stopped. He should have never pressed it again. But curiosity is a cruel master. His hand hovered over the button, and he pressed it. The lab froze again. Elias clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening over the edge of the desk as his eyes darted across the room. His breath came out in short, sharp exhales, clouding the still air like cold mist. "Where are you?" He turned. There were two of them now. The first stood in the same place as before, tall, thin, wrong, but the second had moved closer, just inside the doorway, half in, half out, like it had been caught mid-step. Elias forced himself to move, to test the limits of the frozen second. His body felt heavy, as if wading through thick water, but the figures remained unchanged, featureless stains of darkness standing against the sterile white walls. The closest one had no face, but something about its posture suggested it was looking at him. He stepped forward. The moment he did, a sensation rippled through the air, something like static crawling under his skin. The frozen second felt thicker, denser, as if reality was trying to push him out. The figures did not react, not yet. He wanted to reach out, to test their tangibility, but something deep in his instincts screamed at him not to touch them. The second ended, a violent jolt. Sound roared back to life, the hum of the machine, the quiet rustle of air through the vents, the distant murmur of the city beyond the lab. Elias stumbled backward, his stomach twisting in nausea. The figures were gone, but something was different. The lab felt off, like a stage set where someone had shifted the props slightly askew. He turned to his desk. His notebook, the one he had been writing in just an hour ago, was gone. No, not just gone. Erased. He searched frantically, papers overturned, drawers yanked open, but there was no trace of it. He checked the security feed, but the last recording of him writing was missing. He turned back to the device, heart pounding. They hadn't just been watching, they had done something. His hand shook as he hovered over the button again. If two had appeared this time, How many would come next? Elias exhaled shakily. He should walk away. He should destroy the machine, burn his notes, and forget any of this ever happened. Instead, he pressed the button again. The world froze. Elias braced himself, the weight of the frozen second pressing against his skin. He knew what to expect this time, or at least he thought he did. He was wrong. There were more of them, not 2, 5. They stood in different spots around the lab, their thin, distorted shapes blurring at the edges like figures seen through fogged glass. Silent, still, waiting. One loomed near the whiteboard, where his equations sprawled in hasty scrawls. Another stood just inside the storage room, half concealed by the doorframe. One was behind him, too close. Elias's breath hitched as he turned slowly, feeling like a man checking over his shoulder in a pitch-black hallway. It was there, not inches away, but close enough that if it had a face, he would have seen his own reflection in its eyes. But there were no eyes, just an empty, wavering void where a head should be. A terrible thought formed in his mind. What if they can only move when I'm not looking? His muscles locked, his heartbeat pounded in his throat. He needed to test it. With excruciating slowness, Elias blinked. It moved. A flicker, a fraction of motion, but it was enough. The figure was closer. Panic flared through him, but he forced himself to remain still, his breath trembling in his chest. He could feel the thickened air around him, the frozen seconds stretching on like a waking nightmare. He blinked again, even closer. It was playing with him, testing boundaries, learning. A low vibration thrummed through the stillness, like the universe itself was straining against the theft of time. The figures stood rigid, but he could feel them observing, absorbing, understanding. The second ended. A violent lurch. The world snapped back into motion, the hum of the machine, the faint, distant honk of a car, the rustling of his breath in the quiet room. They were gone. But something had changed. Elias's eyes darted across the lab, the whiteboard. His equations, his years of work had been altered. Not erased, but subtly shifted, as if someone or something had corrected them. The coffee mug on his desk was upside down. A chair was slightly pulled out, though he hadn't touched it. He stumbled backward, his vision swimming. They weren't just watching, they were interacting. Elias's hands trembled as he wiped sweat from his forehead. They were testing him piece by piece, but what terrified him most, he was testing them back, and he couldn't stop. He sat down, staring at the machine. His hand hovered over the button, and he pressed it again. The world stopped. Elias barely breathed, standing rigid in the artificial stillness. The sensation of being watched had become suffocating, pressing against his skin like a too heavy atmosphere. This time the figures were everywhere, a dozen, no more. Some clustered in the far corners of the lab, still as gravestones. Others lurked near the walls, the door, the windows. One stood directly in front of the camera, its faceless head tilted, as if peering into the lens. Elias had seen enough horror films to know what this meant. They were aware of being recorded. A cold sweat slicked his back. His original plan had been to capture footage, to prove he wasn't losing his mind. He had set up a live feed, hoping to see what the frozen world looked like when he wasn't inside it. But now a more dreadful thought clawed its way into his mind. Had they always known? Had they always been watching? His breath stilled in his chest as he turned his gaze toward the window. A figure stood outside. His lab was on the 5th floor. Elias's legs threatened to buckle. The figure shouldn't be able to stand there. No ledge, no balcony, just open air. But it wasn't standing. It was pressed against the glass. Its elongated limbs flattened grotesquely, as if its body was less solid, more fluid, something that could fold and stretch beyond the logic of bone and muscle. Its faceless head was angled toward him, its shape bulging and distorting, pressing deeper into the pain like it was trying to force its way through. Elias stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. That was when he noticed the biggest change. The figures no longer stood still, they were moving. It was subtle at first, a slow tilt of a head, the twitch of an elongated limb, but there was no doubt. They were shifting, creeping closer, his stomach clenched. The rules were changing. How long before they could move freely, before they weren't bound to the frozen second at all? The edges of the air around him seemed to vibrate, the frozen world becoming thicker, slower, harder to breathe in. They're reacting to me. His heartbeat pounded like a hammer. He had to get out. With a shaking hand, Elias slammed the override switch. Time lurched back into motion. He staggered, the sudden force of reality crashing over him. The figures were gone, no shadows in the corners, no stretching limbs against the window. But the feed was still running. Elias turned toward the monitor, dread creeping into his bones. He pressed play. The footage showed him pressing the button, stepping into the frozen second. Everything unfolding exactly as he remembered. But then he saw them move. The figures didn't just shift, they flickered. 1 second at the far end of the room, the next inches behind him. Inches. His body turned to stone. He hadn't felt it. He hadn't seen it. But in the recorded second, they had reached for him. His stomach twisted into a knot of ice. They were learning. And next time they wouldn't just reach. Next time they would take. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dim glow of his monitor, replaying the footage over and over, dissecting every frozen frame. He counted how many there were each time he paused time. He watched how they moved when he wasn't looking. And then he saw the mistake. His breath hitched. At the end of the last experiment, when time resumed, the figures vanished as usual. But something was wrong. One of them didn't leave. Elias rewound the footage, frame by frame. At the exact moment time restarted, the shadows in the room recoiled, pulling back into whatever unknowable void they came from. Except for one. It didn't vanish like the others. It simply stayed. A knot of ice twisted in Elias's stomach. He turned his head slowly, afraid of what he might see. The lab looked normal, nothing out of place, but his skin felt wrong, like something heavy and unseen pressed against him. His gaze swept the room. No shadows, no figures, no warped, inhuman shapes standing in the corners. Then why did it feel like he wasn't alone? He rose from his chair, his breath coming out in shallow gasps. He grabbed a wrench from his toolbox, gripping it tightly as he stepped forward. The air changed. It wasn't a sound, it was an absence of one, like stepping into the eye of a storm, a vacuum, a place where sound should exist but didn't. Something was here. Something had stayed. Elias scanned the room, forcing himself to move, to look. His muscles ached with tension, his skin prickling with a deep, primal fear. He reached out, hand trembling, pushing aside equipment, checking every shadow. Nothing. And yet, a feeling remained, a weight in the air, an awareness that did not belong to him. His eyes flicked to the reflection in his monitor, and his stomach dropped. There, behind him. It stood in the doorway, motionless. No definition, no eyes, no mouth, just a mass of dark, wavering space in the vague shape of a human. Waiting. Watching. Elias spun around. Nothing was there. His pulse hammered against his ribs. His reflection had shown it, but reality did not. He took a step back, gripping the edge of his desk. He knew what this meant. It was still here, just beyond his perception. Waiting for the next time, he paused time. His breath came fast, too fast. He turned toward the machine, the glowing button still illuminated, begging for his touch. He had one last thought before he pressed it again. If one of them stayed, how long before more do? Elias barely left the lab over the next few days. He didn't trust the outside world anymore. Every time he looked away, something felt different. Subtle things at first. His keys, gone from the counter where he always left them. A missing notebook he had spent years filling. Then it got worse. His couch, an entire piece of furniture, was missing from his apartment. He stood in the empty space where it had been, heart hammering, trying to convince himself he had moved it. But he knew better. They had taken it. And no one else noticed. He called his sister, fumbling through an awkward conversation before casually asking, "Hey, you remember that blue couch I bought last year?" She hesitated. What couch? His skin went cold. She had sat on it. She had visited his apartment, drank coffee, watched movies on it. And now she didn't even remember it existed. Elias hung up, staring at the empty space in his living room. It hadn't just been removed, it had been erased. The realization hit like a cold knife to the gut. The more he stole from time, the more it stole back. But it wasn't just objects. He dug through old photo albums, his fingers shaking as he flipped through the pages. A birthday party, a childhood vacation, a blurry picture of a woman he once loved but hadn't seen in years. His stomach dropped. Some faces were missing, not scratched out, not blurred, gone. As if those people had never existed. His breath hitched, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Had he done this? Had his experiments peeled them out of reality one by one, like pulling loose threads from a fabric until the whole tapestry unraveled? His hands shook as he grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Names missing. Numbers he didn't remember deleting. His own mother's name wasn't there. Panic surged in his chest. He dialed manually, barely able to see past the adrenaline burning in his skull. The call rang, once, twice. Then, "This number is not in service." Elias sat there listening to the empty tone, his heartbeat thudding like a war drum. It was too late. Time had taken her back. His hands trembled as he turned toward the time stasis device, its humming light casting eerie shadows across the lab. He knew what he had to do. He had to stop, destroy the machine, never press that button again. Instead, he found himself staring at it, his fingers twitching toward the controls, because there was one thought gnawing at the edge of his mind, whispering with an awful certainty. If time had taken his mother, then where had she gone? And the only way to find out was to steal another second. Elias pressed the button. The world froze. His skin burned with tension. His breath caught in his chest like a trapped insect. He had done this too many times before, but this time, he listened. A mistake. The silence was wrong. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was something deeper. A void where sound should have been, but wasn't allowed to exist. And then, beneath that terrible absence, something stirred. A voice. No, voices. At first, they were nothing but a vibration at the edge of perception, like a radio signal buried beneath layers of static. A low, wet murmur that slithered through his mind, crawling into the spaces between his thoughts. He strained to understand. And then, they laughed. Not human laughter, not even close. It was thick and gelatinous, a sound that seemed to move, like something being pulled through a slit in reality. It oozed through the frozen second, folding in on itself, expanding, contracting, a thing too large for sound, too ancient for language. Elias clamped his hands over his ears. It didn't help. They knew him now. They had always known him, but now they were acknowledging it. He turned, his gut twisting in dread. The figures were closer. Their forms had changed, no longer just shadows, but things trying to be human. Their limbs bent at wrong angles, their heads bulged, as if the suggestion of a skull strained against the formlessness beneath. One reached toward him. The moment its elongated fingers broke the stillness, a new voice cut through the others, a wet, slithering whisper that coiled around his bones. "Come." Elias staggered back, his lungs burning. The figure's arm stretched too far, a sinewy black tendril rippling beneath a thin veneer of flesh. A hand, not a hand, reached for him, its fingers splitting at the tips like unraveling rope. And for the first time, Elias saw something beyond them. A gap in the frozen world, a crack in the stillness just behind the figures, something deep and endless, something reaching back. He saw eyes, not two, not dozens, hundreds, some large, some small, some stretching open in jagged sideways slits, all of them fixed on him. They had been waiting, not for his machine, for him. The laughter deepened, echoing through the walls of reality, rattling the air like brittle glass. They were hungry, they were patient, and Elias had brought himself to them. He lunged for the switch, forcing time forward. The world snapped back. The voices cut off, the figures were gone. The lab was silent again, but Elias knew something had changed. He had gone too deep. And the next time he pressed that button, they wouldn't just whisper, they would take him. Elias didn't touch the time stasis device again, but it didn't matter. Reality was already breaking apart. The news report started 2 days later. People were disappearing. Not just vanishing without a trace, but vanishing from time itself. A woman on a subway platform, gone between one step and the next, her motion cut off like a skipped frame. A child at a playground, his mother turning her head for a moment, then looking back to see an empty swing. Gone, not kidnapped, not lost, just removed. Elias sat in his apartment, staring at the screen, his fingers twitching. He scrolled through the footage. Security cameras caught glitches in reality. A businessman in a crowded lobby, his phone in hand, looking up. And then he wasn't there anymore. A jogger on a street corner, one foot lifted to take a step and gone mid-motion. Elias felt sick. It was spreading. He had done this. He checked his apartment for signs of change. More things were missing. His bookshelves had gaps where there shouldn't be. His fridge contained food he didn't remember buying. And his phone contacts? Even worse, names had vanished. He couldn't remember who was missing, only that there had been someone there before. Elias's head pounded. His fingers hovered over the machine again. One more time. Not out of curiosity anymore. This time he needed answers. What had he torn open? Where had they gone? He grabbed the portable control unit, tucking it into his pocket. For the first time, he was going to step outside into the frozen second. See what the world looked like when time wasn't moving. His hands trembled as he pressed the button. The world froze. Elias walked outside, and everything was wrong. The people, the frozen, paused bodies of pedestrians, were all slightly off. Their expressions strained like they were invisible strings holding them in place. Their eyes were too wide, their lips slightly parted as if trying to scream. But the worst part was the sky. It was empty, not cloudy, not dark, just blank, as if something had stolen it. Something above him moved. He looked up, and he saw them, dozens, hundreds, the figures looming in the sky, hanging, watching, waiting. They were outside of time now, and they outnumbered the living. Elias stood in the frozen city, staring at the sky that wasn't a sky anymore. They were everywhere. The figures hung above him, a sea of unmoving shadows, their bodies suspended in the blank expanse. Some were small, almost human-sized. Others were impossibly vast, stretching across the sky like fractures in reality, their edges flickering like torn film reels. They had never been confined to his lab. They had always been here, waiting for someone to see them. His breath came in ragged gasps, the frozen second pressing against his chest like the weight of an ocean. The air was too thick. His skin burned from the pressure of being somewhere he was never meant to be. He turned, forcing his feet forward. The city was lifeless, its people frozen mid-step, mid-motion, trapped in a world that wasn't theirs anymore. He moved between them, the portable control unit gripped tight in his hand. He knew what he needed to do. One final test. He adjusted the machine's settings, pushing past the safety limits. A full minute. If he was going to understand this, to see the truth, he needed more time. His thumb hovered over the button. He exhaled and he pressed it. The shift was instant and violent. A deep vibration ripped through the air, the thickened silence stretching like something on the verge of breaking. Elias stumbled, the pressure in his skull mounting to an unbearable peak. And then they moved. Not just the ones in the sky, all of them. The figures inside the city, the ones that had always been watching, always waiting. They weren't frozen anymore. They were approaching. Every street, every alley, everywhere he turned. Closer. The people around him, the frozen civilians, remained still, unaware of what was happening. But the figures were coming. Their shapes stretched, bending like liquid shadows, their featureless heads tilting as if acknowledging him for the first time. Elias's pulse slammed against his ribs. He turned and ran. The movement was slow, like wading through tar, but he forced himself forward, darting between the motionless people, their stillness now feeling more unnatural than ever. He reached the intersection, and then he saw what was really happening. The edges of the city were fading. Buildings dissolved into nothing, streets unraveling into empty space, like an old photograph burning at the edges. The frozen people nearest the void began to disappear. Not in an instant, but in a way that made Elias's skin crawl, as if something was eating them, digesting them out of time. His breath hitched. This was never about watching. They were consuming, and now they had fully stepped into his world. A full minute was too long. Elias slammed the control unit, forcing time back into motion. The world restarted. The city roared to life, the sounds of engines, distant sirens, the hum of life resuming as if nothing had happened. Elias gasped, falling to his knees. He turned toward the sky, the stars were gone, and in the depths of his soul he knew they weren't going back this time. They were here now, and they were staying. Elias stumbled back into his lab, his vision swimming, his breath ragged. The stars were gone. The city was moving again, people going about their lives, unaware that something had changed. that something had come through. He collapsed into his chair, hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the desk. He had reset time, forced it back into place. But the figures, they hadn't left. A deep, awful stillness settled over him, something in his mind unspooling, fraying like an unraveling thread. He reached for his phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. His contacts were empty. His fingers froze. No names, no numbers, not even his own. Dread crawled up his spine. He opened his email. His messages, nothing. His hands trembled as he reached for his ID badge on the desk, his last tether to the world. His name wasn't on it. The plastic rectangle was blank, as if he had never existed. He stood too fast, knocking over a stack of papers. They weren't his. The notes weren't his handwriting. The equations weren't his. He turned to the lab's security feed. He had to see himself. He scrubbed back through the footage. It showed the lab, the machine, the empty chair where he should have been sitting. His stomach dropped. He hadn't just reset time. He had been erased from it. A sound creaked behind him, slow, deliberate, a door opening. Elias turned. The lab door was ajar. Someone stood there, a figure. Not the formless things he had seen in the frozen second. This was worse. It was him. A perfect copy, standing in the doorway, staring back with his own eyes. Elias couldn't breathe. The copy smiled, a faint hollow motion. Then it turned and walked away, slipping into the world as if it had always belonged, as if it had always been him. Elias reached for the door, his fingers brushing against the frame, but something stopped him. A barrier. The hallway beyond shimmered like a mirage. The edges of reality were slipping past him, the world moving forward without him. He wasn't part of it anymore. He had stolen a second from time, and time had stolen him back. The light in the lab flickered. The hum of the machine faded, and then Elias Mercer was gone. Hey Reddit. This is one of those stories I never thought I'd be telling, but here we are. I want to preface this by saying I'm not proud of what I did, but sometimes desperation leads us down some pretty dark paths. So, a few months ago, I was in a really rough spot. I'd recently had a huge blow-up with my friends, like total bridges burned kind of fight. It wasn't even over anything that serious, but you know how these things go. Pride and alcohol don't mix well. Suddenly, I found myself alone, with just my thoughts and the bottom of a whiskey bottle for company. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys being alone, and the silence was unbearable. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge or ask questions. That's when I made a choice that I regret more than anything else. I turned to the dark web. Now, I'm no hacker. I barely know how to use my router, let alone navigate the depths of the dark web. But after a few hours of browsing through sketchy forums and YouTube videos, I found a site offering companionship services. Basically, you could hire someone to hang out with you. There were all sorts of people offering different services, but one listing caught my eye. Drinking buddy available, no judgment, no questions. It seemed perfect. The guy's username was JackDangle57, which I assumed was some kind of Jack Daniels reference. I was intrigued, and after a bit of back and forth, I decided to hire him. He didn't ask for much, just enough to cover his travel and services, which I assumed meant his time and some drinks. The first time Jack came over, I was a nervous wreck. I'd never done anything like this before, and it felt sketchy as hell. But when he showed up, he seemed pretty normal. Just a guy in his late 20s wearing a worn-out jacket and jeans, with a friendly grin that made me relax a bit. He brought a bottle of whiskey and we started drinking. Honestly, it was fun at first. Jack was a great listener, and we'd share stories about our lives, talk about music, movies, whatever came to mind. He was surprisingly knowledgeable about a lot of stuff, and I actually found myself enjoying the company. For the first couple of weeks, this arrangement worked out well. I'd pay Jack, he'd come over with a bottle, and we'd hang out. He never overstayed his welcome, and he didn't seem to care when I rambled on about my problems. It felt like having a real friend again, someone who was there without any strings attached. But then things started getting weird. One night, After we'd had a few too many drinks, Jack started asking questions. Not about me, but about my house, my job, and other personal details that felt a little too intrusive. I brushed it off as drunken curiosity, but it left me feeling uneasy. I should have trusted my gut, but I was too desperate for companionship to question it. Over the next few weeks, Jack's visits became more frequent. He'd show up unannounced, often with expensive-looking bottles of liquor that I definitely hadn't paid for. When I asked about it, he'd just laugh it off, saying he had connections. I was too naive to see the red flags waving right in front of me. I was just grateful to have someone around, even if he was a little too mysterious for comfort. One night, though, everything changed. Jack and I were sitting in my living room, the usual whiskey between us, when he suddenly got up and said he needed to make a call. I watched him step outside, pacing my front porch as he spoke in hushed tones. It struck me as odd, but I was tipsy enough not to care. When he came back inside, his demeanor had shifted. He was quieter, more focused, and I felt a shiver of unease creep in. But I ignored it, thinking I was just imagining things. We finished our drinks and he left shortly after. The next morning, I woke up to a notification from my bank, several large withdrawals that I definitely hadn't made. Panic set in as I checked my accounts, realizing that a significant chunk of my savings had vanished overnight. My first thought was that my accounts had been hacked. But then I remembered Jack's sudden interest in my finances, and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I tried calling the number he'd given me, but it went straight to voicemail. I wanted to believe it was all just a coincidence, that maybe I'd been too careless with my online security, but deep down, I knew. I'd let a stranger into my life, into my home, and now I was paying the price. Part of me wanted to go to the police, but what would I say? That I hired a drinking buddy from the dark web and now he'd robbed me blind? It sounded insane, like something out of a bad thriller movie. So instead, I decided to do some digging of my own, hoping to find some trace of who Jack really was and how he'd managed to pull this off. That was the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming, and as I pieced things together, I realized just how deep this rabbit hole went, but that's a story for another day. Hey Reddit, I'm back with the next part of my bizarre story. If you remember, I left off with the terrifying realization that my so-called drinking buddy from the dark web might have stolen from me. My savings were dwindling, and my mind was racing to figure out how Jack had done it. I started my investigation by retracing my steps. I went through all my past transactions and messages with Jack, trying to find a clue. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been planning this from the start. Maybe I had been too open, too trusting. I couldn't deny that I had let my guard down during our drinking sessions, and I cursed myself for being so careless. One thing was clear: I needed to find Jack and confront him. But first, I needed to figure out who he really was. I started by checking the online profiles he had shared with me. Most of them were vague and didn't give away much, clearly burner accounts designed to disappear. The only thing I had was an email address, but that wasn't much to go on. I decided to take a deeper dive into the forums and sites where I had initially found Jack. I hoped to find any mention of him or anyone with a similar MO. After a few hours of scrolling through sketchy message boards and random posts, I came across a thread discussing a person who fit Jack's description. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had hired him. One user, going by Whiskey Sipper, shared a story eerily similar to mine. They mentioned hiring a drinking buddy from the dark web who disappeared with a hefty sum of their money. The poster didn't reveal too much, but mentioned a meetup gone wrong. They hinted that this so-called buddy had connections deeper than just being a friendly ear for hire. I decided to reach out to Whiskey Sipper, hoping they could shed more light on who Jack really was and maybe even help me find him. To my surprise, they responded quickly. We exchanged a few messages, and I learned that they had managed to track down Jack to a local bar where he often found his next targets. The bar was a dive, located on the outskirts of town, a place I'd never been, but now felt compelled to visit. My plan was simple: confront Jack and demand answers. Maybe it was foolish, but I felt like I had nothing left to lose. The following evening, I found myself standing outside the dimly lit bar, heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. I took a deep breath and walked in, scanning the room for any sign of Jack. The place was crowded, filled with the chatter of regulars and the clinking of glasses. My eyes landed on a familiar face sitting at the bar. Jack, laughing with a group of people as if he hadn't just ruined my life. I approached him, trying to keep my composure despite the adrenaline surging through me. When he saw me, his expression changed from surprise to something unreadable, like he had been expecting me, but wasn't quite sure how this encounter would play out. "Hey, long time no see," he said, a casualness in his voice that made my skin crawl. "Cut the crap, Jack," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know what you did. You emptied my accounts, and I want answers." He looked at me, unfazed, and then gestured for me to sit down. I hesitated but eventually obliged, not wanting to cause a scene just yet. "I can explain," Jack said, leaning in so only I could hear him. "But you're not going to like it." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I nodded, urging him to continue. He started talking about a network, a group of individuals who offered various services on the dark web. "It was a game for them," he said. "A way to make quick money off people like me who were too lonely or desperate to see the signs. According to Jack, my accounts had been compromised the first night we met. He had a device that cloned my phone and accessed my personal information while we drank. It was a sophisticated operation, and Jack was just the face of it. You weren't supposed to be targeted. Not really," he explained. "But once you started opening up about your financial situation, they saw an opportunity." I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just a scam. It was an organized effort to prey on people in their most vulnerable moments. I wanted to lash out, to scream and demand everything back, but I knew I needed to play this smart. "So what now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jack paused, glancing around the bar. "You walk away," he said finally. "This isn't something you can win. They'll bury you if you try to fight it." His words hung in the air like a death sentence. I realized then that this was bigger than just me and Jack. I was dealing with something far more dangerous than I had anticipated. Feeling defeated, I stood up, ready to leave. But as I turned to go, Jack caught my arm, leaning in close to whisper, "Watch your back. They don't take kindly to loose ends." I left the bar that night with more questions than answers, feeling the weight of Jack's warning pressing down on me. My life had been turned upside down, and now I had to figure out what to do next. But one thing was clear. This was far from over. Hello, Reddit. Back with part 3 of my dark web misadventure. If you've been following along, you know I'm in deep with a network that preys on people like me. I thought I was just hiring a drinking buddy, but it turns out I was playing a dangerous game without even realizing it. After my encounter with Jack, I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to figure out my next move. I knew I needed to be smart about this. Running to the authorities seemed pointless. How would I explain hiring a stranger from the dark web? And besides, Jack's warning echoed in my mind. I couldn't just walk away, not after everything they'd taken from me. Determined to fight back, I started researching. I dug into everything I could find about the dark web, learning about encryption, anonymity, and the hidden world I had unwittingly stumbled into. I also kept my ears open for any mention of Jack's network, hoping to gather enough information to protect myself and, maybe, find a way to turn the tables. During this time, I reached out to Whiskey Sipper again. They'd been in my shoes and had managed to dig up some valuable intel about Jack's operations. They pointed me towards a few online communities dedicated to exposing scams and criminals operating on the dark web. These forums were filled with people who had been burned like me, sharing tips on how to recover and stay safe. One user, going by Cypherbreaker, seemed to know a lot about the technical side of things. They offered advice on securing my devices and protecting my remaining assets. They also suggested I track Jack's digital footprint, which might help me find a way to reclaim what I'd lost. With their guidance, I started monitoring my accounts closely, setting up alerts for any unusual activity. I also reached out to my bank, explaining that I'd been a victim of fraud without going into too much detail. Thankfully, they were able to secure my accounts, though retrieving the lost money would be a long process. As I dug deeper, I discovered that Jack and his network weren't just targeting lonely individuals. They had their hands in a variety of illegal activities, from identity theft to money laundering. The more I learned, the more I realized how lucky I was to have gotten out when I did, even if it was with a bruised ego and an empty wallet. But it wasn't just about recovering my losses anymore. I felt a responsibility to stop Jack and prevent others from falling into the same trap. With Cipher Breaker's help, I started piecing together a plan. It was risky, but I was done being a victim. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would lure Jack out by pretending to be a new client, using a different alias and burner email. If I could gather enough evidence of his activities, maybe I could find a way to expose him without getting caught in the crossfire. I set up a fake profile and contacted Jack, posing as someone interested in his services. To my surprise, he responded quickly, arranging to meet at the same bar where we'd last seen each other. My heart raced as I prepared for the meeting, knowing that this was a gamble that could go horribly wrong. On the day of the meet, I arrived early, settling into a corner booth where I had a clear view of the entrance. I'd brought a small voice recorder hidden in my jacket pocket, hoping to capture anything that might be useful. Jack arrived a few minutes later, scanning the room before spotting me. He walked over with the same easy confidence he'd always had, sitting down across from me with a friendly smile. "New client?" he asked, eyes glinting with amusement. "You don't look the type." I forced a smile, trying to keep my nerves in check. "Just curious," I replied, hoping to keep him talking. We chatted for a while, and I steered the conversation towards his services. I could tell he was being cautious, not revealing too much, but there were moments where he slipped, hinting at the larger network behind him. Finally, I asked the question I'd been dreading. "So how does it work? The whole transferring funds thing?" I tried to sound casual, like someone genuinely interested in the process. Jack hesitated, glancing around the bar. For a moment I thought he'd caught on, but then he leaned in, lowering his voice. "It's all about access," he said. "Once you have someone's trust, everything else falls into place." His words sent a chill through me, but I kept my composure, nodding along as if I understood. We talked a bit more, but I could sense Jack growing suspicious. Before he left, he gave me a warning look. "Be careful," he said. "You're playing a dangerous game." I left the bar that night with more questions than answers, but I felt like I was getting closer to understanding Jack's operation. I just hoped I wasn't too late to do something about it. Back home, I reviewed the recording, taking notes on anything that might be useful. I knew I was in over my head, but I was determined to see this through. Jack had warned me about playing a dangerous game, but what he didn't know was that I was ready to turn the tables, no matter the risk. Here I am again, diving even deeper into this mess I've created. If you've been keeping up, you know that my dark web drinking buddy Jack turned out to be part of a larger network that scammed me. I've been gathering evidence, hoping to find a way to stop him and the organization he's a part of. After our last meeting, I was convinced I had enough to go to the authorities, but I needed more concrete evidence, something that could actually take down this network. With the information I'd collected so far, I reached out to Cipher Breaker for help in figuring out my next move. Cipher Breaker suggested I try to find more evidence of Jack's activities. They advised me to look for connections between Jack and other known aliases or websites he might be using. It was time-consuming work, but I was determined to make a dent in their operation. I began spending every free moment trawling through forums, piecing together any hints I could find about Jack and his associates. It was like putting together a massive jigsaw puzzle without the picture on the box. I spent hours poring over threads, following leads that often turned out to be dead ends, but slowly, I started to see a pattern. I noticed that certain usernames popped up in multiple places, on forums, review sites, and even in comments on dark web listings. These names were always connected to suspicious activities, and they seemed to work in tandem. It was clear that Jack was just one cog in a much larger machine. My breakthrough came when I discovered a message board dedicated to exposing scams on the dark web. Among the threads, I found a post detailing a recent scam similar to mine, but with more technical details on how the group operated. The author of the post went by the name Deep Dive, and they seemed to know a lot about Jack's network. I contacted Deep Dive, explaining my situation and asking for any help they could provide. To my surprise, they responded quickly, agreeing to share what they knew. According to Deep Dive, Jack and his crew specialized in identity theft and were known for their elaborate schemes to siphon money from unsuspecting victims. They often used the guise of companionship or services to gain access to personal information, just as Jack had done with me. Deep Dive also revealed that the group used a hidden server to store their data, which they regularly accessed and updated. If I could get into that server, I might find enough evidence to take them down. The problem was accessing it. Doing so would require technical skills far beyond my own. Luckily, Deep Dive offered to help. They suggested a plan. If I could lure Jack into accessing the server during one of our meetings, Deep Dive could intercept the connection and trace it back to its source. It was a long shot, but it was our best chance. I contacted Jack again, this time under the pretense of wanting to discuss a new deal. We arranged to meet at a different location, a small cafe outside of town. I felt anxious, knowing that this was potentially my last chance to stop him. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early, setting up my laptop in a secluded corner with a clear view of the entrance. Deep Dive had provided me with a program that would track Jack's online activity as soon as he connected to the server. All I needed was for him to access it during our conversation. Jack arrived, looking as relaxed as ever. He sat across from me, ordering a coffee and chatting as if we were old friends. I could feel my heart pounding, hoping my nerves didn't give me away. As we talked, I subtly steered the conversation toward the topic of his business. I played the role of an interested client, asking questions that hinted at wanting to invest in his operations. Jack seemed intrigued, and as I hoped, he eventually pulled out his phone to access his network's server. I watched him carefully, noting the moment he connected to the server. My laptop blinked, indicating that Deep Dive was intercepting the connection. I had to keep Jack occupied long enough for them to trace it. We continued chatting, and I could tell Jack was growing suspicious. He glanced around as if sensing something was off. But before he could act on his suspicions, I received a message from Deep Dive confirming they had traced the server's location. I knew I couldn't keep Jack there any longer without raising alarm. So I wrapped up our meeting, thanking him for his time and leaving the cafe as quickly as I could. I felt a surge of relief mixed with fear, knowing that I was one step closer to exposing Jack and his network. Once home, I contacted Deep Dive again. They confirmed they'd gathered enough data to pinpoint the server and its contents. With this information, we could finally go to the authorities and bring Jack's operation down. But there was still one thing nagging at me, a feeling that I was missing something important. Jack's warning about playing a dangerous game echoed in my mind, and I knew that whatever came next would be the most challenging part of my journey. Hey Reddit, here we are, the conclusion to my story. If you've stuck with me this far, you know I've been through a lot trying to unravel Jack's network. With Deep Dive's help, I finally had enough evidence to go to the authorities, but I knew that this last step would be the most dangerous. After our successful trace of Jack's server, Deep Dive and I compiled everything we had gathered into a comprehensive report. We included details of Jack's scams, the server's location, and evidence linking him to various fraudulent activities. It was a solid case, but I was still nervous about what would happen next. The following morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer, wanting to make sure I was protected when I went to the police. My lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman named Claire, reviewed everything and agreed that we had a strong case. She also warned me about the potential risks, emphasizing that people like Jack often have connections that go deeper than we realize. Feeling a mix of apprehension and resolve, I took the report to the local police department. Claire accompanied me, ensuring that everything was handled by the book. We sat down with Detective Ramirez, a no-nonsense officer who listened intently as I explained the situation. Detective Ramirez was surprisingly receptive, and I could see the gears turning in his mind as he reviewed the evidence. He assured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly and advised me to stay low for a while, just in case Jack or his associates caught wind of our actions. Over the next few weeks, I was on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder and triple-checking my locks. I kept in touch with Deep Dive, who assured me that they had taken extra precautions to protect their identity as well. The waiting was agonizing, but I knew it was necessary. Then one afternoon I received a call from Detective Ramirez. He informed me that the police had raided the location of the server and found extensive evidence of Jack's network. They had managed to arrest several members of the group, including Jack himself, who was caught trying to flee the city. Hearing those words was a huge relief, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Knowing that Jack and his crew were behind bars meant I could finally breathe easier. I thanked Detective Ramirez and Claire for their help, grateful that justice had been served. But even with Jack out of the picture, I knew I still had work to do. My finances were in shambles, and I had to rebuild what had been lost. With the support of my bank and some financial advice from Claire, I started piecing my life back together. It was slow going, but I was determined to move forward. I also stayed in touch with Deep Dive, who had become a valuable ally throughout this ordeal. We continued to share information about other potential scams, hoping to prevent more people from falling into similar traps. It felt good to be part of something positive, turning my negative experience into a force for good. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized how much I had learned about myself and the world around me. I'd made mistakes, but I'd also found strength I didn't know I had. I'd discovered the importance of vigilance and the value of true friendship, even in the unlikeliest of places. In the end, I'd hired a drinking buddy from the dark web, hoping to fill a void in my life, only to find myself in a whirlwind of deceit and danger. But through perseverance and a little help from unexpected allies, I managed to turn the tables and come out stronger on the other side. So if you ever find yourself in a dark place, remember this: you're never truly alone, and there's always a way out, even if it's not the path you initially imagined. Stay smart, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of a determined mind. Thanks for listening, Reddit. It's been a wild ride, and I'm grateful to have had the chance to share it with you. Let me start by saying I've always been curious about the darker corners of the internet. You know, the places you hear about but never actually venture into unless you're feeling particularly brave or foolish. So one Friday night, after watching way too many conspiracy videos and downing an excessive amount of caffeine, I decided to explore the dark web. Now, I'm not a tech genius or anything. I just followed some guides and used a VPN and Tor browser, thinking I was being all stealthy. Initially, it was underwhelming, mostly forums and black market stuff I had no interest in. But then I stumbled upon a link that simply read, "Welcome to the Abyss." Intrigued and maybe a bit naive, I clicked on it. The site was minimalistic, just a blank page with a download button. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. My computer seemed to freeze for a moment before resuming normal operations. I checked my desktop and saw a new file named darkweb.zip. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. Inside were two files, a video and an MP3 titled, "Welcome to Your Doom." I know, right? It sounds cheesy and something out of a low-budget horror film, but I was intrigued. The video file was surprisingly short, just about a minute long. It showed some grainy footage of what appeared to be an empty room, flickering lights, and distorted audio. Nothing really scary, but it had this unsettling vibe that made me wish I hadn't opened it. Then there was the MP3 file. I hesitated but eventually hit play. A robotic voice echoed through my speakers saying, "Welcome to your doom. There is no escape now." Again, it sounded cheesy, but there was something eerie about it, like whoever made it wasn't just trying to scare me, but genuinely believed in the message. I shrugged it off as a prank until the weird stuff started happening. The next day, I began receiving strange text messages from an unknown number. They started off innocent enough, just random sequences of numbers and letters that looked like gibberish. I figured it was spam and ignored them, but then the messages started getting personal. They mentioned my name, where I worked, even what I had for lunch that day. Now, I was genuinely creeped out. I asked my friends if they were playing some kind of elaborate joke on me, but they all denied it, and knowing them, they wouldn't put this much effort into a prank. Things escalated when I noticed people watching me. At first, I thought it was paranoia, a side effect of all the creepy internet stuff. But there were these moments when I could feel someone's gaze lingering a little too long. A man in a dark hoodie sitting at the corner of a cafe, or a woman who seemed to be following me down the street. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but then someone tried to run me over. It happened when I was crossing the street near my apartment. I glanced both ways and saw the road was clear. But out of nowhere, this car came speeding towards me, tires screeching. I barely jumped out of the way in time. As I lay on the sidewalk catching my breath, the car stopped for a moment. The driver's window slightly rolled down, and then it sped off again. I didn't get a good look at the driver, but something about the car felt familiar. I'm still not sure if it was an accident or something more sinister, but it left me on edge. The last straw was when someone tried to grab me. It was late at night, and I was coming home from a friend's place. I took a shortcut through an alley, a decision I'll forever regret. Halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn around, someone grabbed me from behind, covering my mouth. I struggled, kicking and flailing until I managed to bite the person's hand. They yelped in pain and loosened their grip just enough for me to break free and run. I sprinted the rest of the way home, heart pounding in my chest, convinced they were still behind me. When I finally got inside, I locked all the doors and windows, breathing heavily as I tried to calm down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to piece together what was happening. It all seemed to trace back to that stupid file from the dark web. But why? Why me? What did I get myself into? I knew I had to figure it out. Ignoring it clearly wasn't working, and whoever or whatever was behind this wasn't going to stop. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would turn my life upside down. After that night, I knew I couldn't ignore what was happening. My mind was racing, and every small noise seemed amplified, like it was a signal of impending danger. I felt like I was in a bad movie, one where the protagonist stumbles into something way over their head. I needed to understand what I had gotten myself into, and, more importantly, how to get out of it. First, I decided to go back and delete the files from my computer. I booted up the PC, half expecting something sinister to pop up again. When I found the dark web zip file, I hesitated for a moment. What if deleting it somehow made things worse? But I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. With a deep breath, I deleted it and emptied the trash. With that small victory, I turned my attention to figuring out what the strange messages meant. I began researching, trying to decipher the random sequences of numbers and letters. I was convinced there had to be some hidden meaning or code. I reached out to a friend who was a bit of a tech whiz. I didn't tell him everything, just that I'd received some odd messages and needed help figuring them out. He was intrigued, probably more excited than concerned. After looking over the messages, he pointed out that they could be coordinates or some kind of cipher. It sounded far-fetched, but at this point, I was willing to entertain any possibility. We spent hours trying to decode them. Finally, my friend had a breakthrough. The messages were GPS coordinates. When we entered them into a map, they pointed to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that whoever was sending these messages wanted me to go there. It seemed like a trap, but I needed answers. The next day, my friend and I decided to check it out together. We planned it during the day, hoping that daylight would somehow lessen the danger. As we approached the warehouse, I felt a mix of fear and adrenaline. The building looked like it hadn't been used in years, with boarded-up windows and rusted metal doors. We hesitated at the entrance, my friend whispering that we could still turn back. But I was determined to get to the bottom of this, so we pushed forward. Inside, the air was musty, and the floor creaked under our feet. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for a few scattered crates and debris. We walked through cautiously, listening for any signs of movement. Suddenly, my friend noticed something. An old laptop sitting on one of the crates, its screen flickering with static. I approached it, heart pounding, and noticed a sticky note on the keyboard. It read, "Watch this." My friend and I exchanged a nervous glance, but curiosity got the better of us. I hit play on the only video file on the laptop. The video was chilling. It showed various clips of people being followed, similar to what I had experienced, but it was much more intense. Each person looked terrified, glancing over their shoulders, running from unseen pursuers. The video ended with a message that said, "You're next." I felt a wave of panic, but also a strange sense of clarity. This was a game to whoever was behind it. They were watching, waiting for my reaction. But why? What did they gain from this? My friend and I quickly left the warehouse, feeling the weight of someone's eyes on us as we retreated. I realized that the situation was more dangerous than I had thought. Whoever was orchestrating this wasn't just playing games, they were serious. Back at my apartment, I decided to contact the authorities. I knew they'd probably think I was crazy, but I couldn't handle this alone. I gathered all the evidence I had: the video, the messages, even the attempted hit and run and kidnapping. When I went to the police station, I told them everything, hoping they would believe me. The officer I spoke to seemed skeptical, but promised to look into it. I left feeling a mix of relief and frustration. I had done what I could, but it felt like it wasn't enough. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I double-checked all my locks and windows, paranoid that someone was outside. As I lay in bed, I couldn't help but wonder what the end game was. Why had I been targeted, and what would happen next? With no answers in sight, all I could do was try to stay alert and hope that someone, somewhere, was working to stop this nightmare. Little did I know, things were about to get even more bizarre. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. Despite reporting everything to the authorities, I had little hope that they'd be able to unravel the twisted mess I'd stumbled into. Meanwhile, the texts kept coming, more cryptic than before, now laced with taunts and vague threats. I was on edge constantly, jumping at every unexpected sound. Even the comfort of my own home felt tainted. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was under surveillance, as if whoever was behind this had eyes everywhere. My tech-savvy friend, sensing my growing desperation, suggested we take a more proactive approach. He came over one evening with a slew of equipment, things I'd never even heard of, like signal jammers and surveillance detectors. His plan was simple: sweep my apartment for any devices or signals that could be tracking me. It was a long shot, but at this point, I was willing to try anything. As he moved through the rooms, scanning and listening for anything unusual, I watched with a mix of hope and dread. I half expected him to find nothing, and part of me feared what he might uncover. Suddenly, his device started beeping near one of my living room vents. Carefully, we unscrewed the cover and found a tiny camera tucked inside. It was expertly hidden, positioned to capture a clear view of my living room. My heart sank at the thought of how long it might have been there, what it might have seen. With a sense of grim determination, we continued searching, finding 2 more hidden cameras and a strange device under my couch that seemed to be transmitting a signal. This discovery was horrifying, yet oddly empowering. Finally, I had some tangible evidence of foul play. We disabled the devices and packed them up, planning to hand them over to the police the next day. This was proof of something illegal, something that had crossed into the real world from the digital nightmare. That night I slept better than I had in weeks, though still fitfully. The knowledge that I'd found and removed those invasive devices was a small victory, but it also raised more questions. Who had placed them, and how had they managed to breach my home without me noticing? The following morning, I headed to the police station with the cameras and the transmitting device in tow. My friend had come along for support, and together we laid out our findings before the same officer I'd spoken to previously. To my relief this time, he seemed to take my claims more seriously. The presence of physical evidence was hard to dismiss, and he promised to open an investigation. Though his assurances were somewhat comforting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still in the eye of the storm. Determined to regain some sense of normalcy, I tried to carry on with my daily life. Work, social obligations, and errands all felt like distractions from the underlying threat. But with each day that passed without incident, I dared to hope that maybe the worst was over. Then came another unexpected twist. One afternoon, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read "Truth," and inside was a message that made my blood run cold. "You're in too deep. Meet me tonight at 8 p.m. at the park near your apartment. Come alone if you want answers." Against my better judgment, I decided to go. I needed to know what was happening, who was behind it, and why I had been targeted. My friend, naturally worried, insisted on following at a distance to ensure my safety. As night fell, I walked to the park, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. The park was dimly lit, with only a few scattered street lamps casting long shadows across the path. I spotted a figure standing near a bench, shrouded in darkness. Approaching cautiously, I asked, "Are you the one who emailed me?" The figure nodded, and as they stepped into the light, I saw that it was a young woman, probably not much older than me. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name's Emily," she replied, her voice low but urgent. "I was involved with the group that's been targeting you. I didn't know how far they'd go. I want to help you." Her words tumbled out, a mix of regret and fear. She explained that the dark website I'd stumbled upon was a front for a group of hackers and pranksters who thrived on chaos and fear. They targeted random people to test their skills and see how much they could manipulate and control without being caught. "What about the cameras, the attempts on my life?" I pressed. "That wasn't supposed to happen," Emily insisted. "Someone higher up took an interest in you. It got out of hand." I was stunned, struggling to process everything. Emily urged me to be cautious, to keep everything I'd discovered quiet while the police investigated. She promised to send me more information as soon as she could safely do so. With that, she disappeared into the night, leaving me with more questions than answers. Though I was grateful for her warning, it was clear that my ordeal was far from over. Whoever was behind this had real power, and I had unwittingly become a part of their twisted game. I returned home, determined to see this through to the end. The stakes had never been higher, but at least now I had a glimmer of hope, a chance to fight back and reclaim my life. The revelation from Emily left me reeling. Knowing that I had been a pawn in a twisted game orchestrated by a shadowy group was unnerving, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. Armed with new information, I was determined to expose these people and end their reign of terror. The following day, I received an email from Emily with an attachment labeled evidence.zip. The file contained logs of online conversations, usernames, and even snippets of code used by the group to orchestrate their operations. It was a treasure trove of information that I hoped would help the authorities build a case against them. I took the evidence to the police, meeting with the officer who had been handling my case. He seemed genuinely interested, promising to look into it and keep me informed of any progress. Leaving the station, I felt a renewed sense of hope, but I knew I had to remain vigilant. In the days that followed, the strange messages and surveillance seemed to cease. It was as if Emily's intervention had scared them off, or perhaps they were regrouping. Either way, I used the lull to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. My friend and I continued to monitor my computer and phone for any suspicious activity, but for the first time in weeks, things seemed calm. Then one evening I received another email from Emily. This one was brief and to the point. Be careful. They know I helped you. My heart sank as I realized the danger was far from over. Emily had risked everything to give me this information, and now it seemed the group was aware of her betrayal. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched again. Everywhere I went, I was hyper-aware of my surroundings, scanning for familiar faces or vehicles. I hated living in fear, but I knew it was necessary to stay one step ahead. As a precaution, my friend suggested we set up security cameras around my apartment. It was a good idea, and the installation process was surprisingly straightforward. The added layer of protection helped ease some of my anxiety, though I knew it wasn't a foolproof solution. A few nights later, I received a text from an unknown number. Meet me where it all began. It didn't take long to figure out the sender meant the abandoned warehouse. It was risky, but I felt compelled to go. If Emily had more information or if the group wanted to negotiate, I needed to know. My friend insisted on coming with me, and together we made our way to the warehouse. It was late, and the place was even more ominous at night. We approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Inside, the warehouse was silent, save for the distant hum of city life. We moved through the space, flashlights sweeping across the dusty floor. In the center of the room, a lone figure stood, their face obscured by a hood. "Emily?" I called out, hoping it was her and not a trap. The figure nodded and lowered the hood. It was indeed Emily, but she looked different, more tense, as if she had been through a lot since our last meeting. "I'm glad you came," she said, glancing around nervously. "We don't have much time. They're closer than you think." "What do you mean?" I asked, heart racing. "I found out more about their plans," Emily explained. "They're not just targeting random people. They're looking for specific individuals, people who can help them with bigger schemes. You were chosen because they thought you could be an asset." I was stunned. The idea that this was all part of some larger plan was terrifying. "What do they want me to do?" I asked. "They want to recruit you," Emily replied, her voice grave. "They think you have skills they need, or that you could be manipulated into helping them. I think they underestimated you, though." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, genuinely curious. Emily sighed. "I was part of the group for a while. I believed in their cause until I saw what they were willing to do to innocent people. I couldn't stand by and let them ruin lives. I wanted out, but that's not something you can just walk away from. Helping you was my way of making amends." Her words resonated with me. I realized Emily was taking a huge risk by coming forward, and I owed it to her to see this through. "What should we do now?" I asked, feeling the weight of the situation. "We need to get this information to someone who can take them down for good," Emily said. "I have contacts in cybersecurity who might be able to help, but it's dangerous. They'll be watching." Before I could respond, we heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. We exchanged a panicked glance, and Emily gestured for us to hide. We ducked behind a stack of crates, hearts pounding as we listened to the footsteps grow closer. A group of people entered the warehouse, their voices low and serious. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it was clear they were searching for something or someone. Emily motioned for us to stay quiet, and we waited with bated breath, hoping they wouldn't find us. After what felt like an eternity, The footsteps retreated, and the voices faded into the night. We waited a few more minutes before daring to emerge from our hiding spot. "That was too close," Emily whispered, visibly shaken. "We need to move quickly." We made our way out of the warehouse, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. I knew we were on borrowed time, but for the first time, I felt like we had a fighting chance. Emily promised to contact her cybersecurity friends and come up with a plan to expose the group. I left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to see this through to the end. As I walked home with my friend, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the allies I'd found along the way. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least I wasn't facing it alone. The tension in the days that followed was palpable, like the calm before a storm. I stayed vigilant, constantly looking over my shoulder and staying in close contact with Emily and my tech-savvy friend. Every moment felt like a countdown to some inevitable confrontation. Emily worked tirelessly, using her connections to gather more intel on the group. Her friends in cybersecurity proved invaluable, helping to piece together the identities and operations of those behind the chaos. The more we learned, the clearer it became that this group was more dangerous and widespread than we initially thought. Meanwhile, I did my best to maintain a facade of normalcy, going about my daily routine while keeping a watchful eye on my surroundings. My friend continued to help me monitor my devices, ensuring that no new threats slipped through. We were on high alert, but we also knew that we needed a solid plan to bring this to a conclusion. One evening, Emily called with news. They had enough evidence to take to the authorities, but we needed to act fast. The group was aware that something was amiss, and it was only a matter of time before they would try to cover their tracks. We decided to meet at a safe location, my friend's apartment, which was outside the usual areas we frequented. As we gathered around the laptop, Emily laid out the plan. Her cybersecurity contacts had managed to trace the group's online activities to a central location, a nondescript office building in a neighboring city. "They're planning something big," Emily explained, her expression grim. "We need to get this information to the authorities before they make their next move." Armed with the evidence and the details of the group's location, we prepared to make our case to the police. It felt like a long shot, but it was our best hope of stopping them before they could harm anyone else. The next day, we went to the police station, armed with the evidence and a well-prepared statement of what we had discovered. The officer who had been handling my case listened intently, reviewing the files and asking questions. With Emily's testimony and the detailed information we had gathered, he seemed convinced of the seriousness of the situation. Within hours, a task force was assembled to investigate the location and the people involved. It was a tense wait as we stayed back, hoping our efforts would pay off. Emily, my friend, and I huddled together, anxiously awaiting any news. Late that evening, we received a call from the officer. The raid had been successful. They had apprehended several members of the group and confiscated a trove of digital evidence that corroborated our findings. It was a massive relief to know that the nightmare was finally over, that the group's influence and power had been curtailed. In the aftermath, life slowly began to return to normal. Emily, grateful for a chance at redemption, decided to work with cybersecurity experts to prevent similar groups from forming in the future. Her bravery had been instrumental in unraveling the group's operations, and she was determined to use her knowledge for good. My friend and I took time to reflect on everything that had happened, grateful for the unexpected alliances and the resolution we had achieved. Though it was a harrowing experience, it had also taught us the importance of vigilance and the power of standing up against those who would do harm. As for me, I learned to be more cautious about my digital footprint, mindful of the potential dangers lurking online. But I also realized the strength that comes from confronting fear and refusing to be a victim. The strange file that had appeared on my computer had set off a chain of events I could never have anticipated. Yet through courage, friendship, and determination, we had managed to turn the tide. In the end, the darkness of the web couldn't overcome the light of truth and justice. Thank you for following my journey. It was an experience I'll never forget, a reminder that even in your darkest times, never say you have hit the very bottom, because you can always go lower. Hey Reddit, this is my first time posting here, so I hope I'm doing this right. I've been sitting on this story for a while, and it's finally time to share it. I never expected to find myself caught up in something so bizarre, but here we are. It all started with a message on the dark web. I was deep into researching the lost wonders of the world, which is a passion of mine. The Lighthouse of Alexandria always intrigued me. Built by the ancient Egyptians around 280 BC, it stood as one of the tallest structures for centuries. It was destroyed by earthquakes, and only legends remained. That was until a group of divers claimed they found its remains off the coast of Alexandria. I was skeptical, but curious. While scrolling through a dark web forum dedicated to archaeology, I stumbled upon a thread that claimed the Lighthouse of Alexandria was built by aliens. Normally, I'd roll my eyes at such a theory, but this one had an unusual amount of detail, including schematics and descriptions of technology that seemed way beyond the ancient Egyptians. The thread suggested that the lighthouse was an alien navigation tool, a beacon for their ships. I thought it was just another wild theory until I received a private message from a user named Historian42. They claimed to have evidence supporting this theory, and were assembling a team to investigate the underwater ruins. I was invited to join, and against my better judgment, I agreed. After all, who wouldn't be tempted by the chance to uncover secrets of an ancient civilization? A week later, I found myself on a flight to Egypt. The plan was simple: meet the team, examine the ruins, and see if there was any truth to the alien theory. But as soon as I landed, things got complicated. I was greeted by a woman named Dr. Alara, who turned out to be the leader of our little expedition. She was sharp and no-nonsense, with a mind as curious as mine. "We don't have much time," she said as we drove towards the coast. "There's another group interested in these ruins, and their intentions are less than honorable. We need to move fast." The rest of the team consisted of a few other researchers and tech experts. I quickly became friends with Liam, a tech whiz who had been tracking anomalies in the area's electromagnetic fields. According to him, these anomalies matched the schematics found on the forum. If the lighthouse really was alien, it was still emitting some sort of signal. Our first dive was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities. Could this be real? What if we actually found something alien? My excitement was mixed with fear. We were diving into the unknown, both literally and figuratively. Morning came, and we set out on a small boat. The sun was shining, and the sea was calm. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to uncover something extraordinary. As we geared up, Dr. Alara gave us a quick briefing. "Stick together and remember our objective. We need to document everything and bring back evidence before anyone else does." The descent into the water was surreal. The deeper we went, the more the world above faded away, leaving us in an eerie silence. Soon, the outline of the ruins came into view. It was breathtaking. Stone blocks, corroded by centuries underwater, lay scattered across the ocean floor. Among them, we saw strange metal structures, unlike anything I'd seen in historical records. I felt a mix of awe and dread. This wasn't just history. It was something otherworldly. As we approached one of the metal structures, Liam pointed to a panel with symbols etched into it. They resembled hieroglyphs, but were far more complex. We started documenting everything, taking photos and videos. The panel seemed to pulse with a faint blue light, and as we recorded, my mind kept wandering to the implications of what we were discovering. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead. I looked up, expecting to see a large fish or a passing boat. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of water. I shook it off, blaming my overactive imagination. After an hour underwater, we surfaced with our findings. Back on the boat, the excitement was palpable. We were on the verge of something big, and each of us felt it. As we reviewed the footage, it became clear that this was no ordinary archaeological site. The symbols, the metal structures, everything pointed to an advanced technology buried beneath the waves for millennia. That evening, as we sat around discussing our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The other group Dr. Ilara mentioned was lurking nearby, waiting for us to slip up. The race had begun, and we were running out of time. Little did I know, our discovery was just the beginning. The secrets of the lighthouse were deeper than any of us imagined, and what we found next would change everything we thought we knew about history and humanity's place in the universe. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. Hey Reddit, I'm back with part 2 of our incredible journey into the depths of the past and potentially the future. After our initial dive, it was clear that the lighthouse ruins held secrets beyond our wildest dreams. That night, the team was buzzing with energy. We pored over the photos and videos, trying to make sense of the strange symbols and alien-like technology we had uncovered. Liam, ever the tech genius, had already started working on decoding the symbols. "These aren't just random etchings," he said, eyes glued to his laptop. "They're part of a complex language or code. If we can crack it, we might understand what this place was really for." While Liam worked on the symbols, Dr. Ilara and I focused on the structural analysis. The metal structures, though ancient, seemed remarkably well preserved. It was as if they were designed to withstand the ravages of time and nature. "This material doesn't match anything from that era," Dr. Ilara pointed out. "It's like nothing we've seen before." Our curiosity only deepened when we noticed something strange in the footage. Around one of the structures, there was a faint, shimmering aura. At first, we thought it was a trick of the light or a camera glitch, but it persisted throughout the recording. "Maybe it's some kind of energy field," I suggested. "Could it still be active after all these years?" The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. If the lighthouse was indeed an alien construct, we were dealing with technology far beyond our understanding. But we couldn't let fear hold us back. We needed answers, and the only way to get them was to dive deeper, literally and metaphorically. As the night wore on, we brainstormed our next steps. We decided to focus on 2 things: deciphering the symbols and investigating the energy field. If we could understand these elements, we might unlock the secrets of the lighthouse. The next morning, we set out again, this time with more advanced equipment. We had underwater cameras, electromagnetic sensors, and a small device designed by Liam to measure energy fluctuations. As we descended, the same mix of awe and anticipation filled the air. Once we reached the ruins, we split into teams. Liam and Dr. Ilara focused on scanning the energy field while I documented more of the symbols. As I hovered over the metal panels, I felt a strange connection to the site, as if the symbols were trying to communicate with me. Suddenly, a faint hum echoed through the water. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to come from all directions. My heart raced as I signaled to Liam and Dr. Ilara. They heard it too, and their eyes widened in surprise. Liam checked his device and gave a thumbs up. "We're picking up energy spikes. It's definitely active, but we can't tell what it's doing. Be careful." We continued our work, the hum fading but never quite disappearing. I felt a strange sense of urgency, as if time was running out. We needed to gather as much information as possible before the other group got wind of our progress. Back on the boat, we reviewed the data. The energy field seemed to pulse in a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. It was as if the lighthouse was alive, still functioning after all these centuries. The symbols, once indecipherable, began to reveal a story of connection, guidance, and protection. Dr. Ilara theorized that the lighthouse was not just a navigational tool, but a beacon of communication. It might have been sending signals to ships or even acting as a relay station, she speculated. But the real question is, for whom? The implications were staggering. If the lighthouse was a communication hub, who or what was it communicating with? The possibilities were endless and mind-boggling. We were on the verge of a groundbreaking discovery, but it also meant we were treading on dangerous ground. As we prepared for our next dive, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was more than just paranoia. It was a sense of unease that settled deep in my bones. The other group, whoever they were, would stop at nothing to get their hands on this technology. We had to be vigilant, ready for anything. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind swirled with questions and theories. What if the lighthouse's creators were still out there watching us? What if we were awakening something that should remain dormant? I knew that we had to continue, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey had only just begun and that we were on the edge of a discovery that would change everything we thought we knew about our past and our future. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm back with part 3 of our dive into the unknown. After discovering the strange symbols and the pulsing energy field, our excitement was tempered by a growing sense of urgency. The other group Dr. Alara warned us about was likely aware of our progress, and we needed to stay one step ahead. The following day, we held a team meeting to discuss our next move. Liam had made significant progress in decoding the symbols, revealing that they formed a map of sorts, a network of nodes that seemed to connect different locations across the globe. Each node was marked with symbols resembling stars and constellations, suggesting that these sites might be part of a larger system. This could be a guide or a route for the ships, Liam suggested. If this is correct, there could be other lighthouses or beacons around the world. Our mission had just expanded. We were no longer just investigating the Lighthouse of Alexandria. We were potentially uncovering an entire network of alien technology. Dr. Alara decided that we needed to focus on understanding the purpose of this network and how the Alexandria site fit into it. Before we could dive again, something unexpected happened. Our equipment began to malfunction. Cameras and sensors that had worked perfectly the day before suddenly refused to operate. It was as if an unseen force was interfering with our devices. We suspected it might be the energy field we encountered underwater, but without working equipment, we couldn't confirm our theory. Liam was undeterred. "We can fix this," he said confidently, pulling out his toolkit. "We'll just have to make some adjustments." While Liam worked on the equipment, Dr. Alara and I reviewed our notes and recordings. The symbols, the hum, the map, it all pointed to a complex system that was still active in some capacity. We speculated about its purpose, wondering if it was designed to guide, protect, or even warn. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Not by the rival group, but by something else. The thought that the original creators of this technology might still be out there, observing our every move, sent a chill down my spine. By afternoon, Liam had managed to get our equipment back online. We decided to proceed with the dive, but with increased caution. As we descended, the water seemed denser, heavier. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like we were pushing against an invisible barrier. Reaching the ruins, we split up to cover more ground. Dr. Alara and I examined the largest metal structure while Liam focused on the nodes marked on the map. As I scanned the structure, I noticed something new. A small, cylindrical device embedded within the metal. It seemed different from the rest of the artifacts, almost like an upgrade or modification. Using a gentle touch, I carefully extracted the device and placed it in a secure container. We had no idea what it was, but it felt important, as if it held a key to understanding the technology. While we continued our investigation, Liam called us over. He had found another set of symbols etched into a stone slab. These symbols were different, more intricate, and arranged in a pattern that resembled an orbit around a central point. "It's like a solar system," Liam observed. "This could represent a home base or a central hub for the network." The realization hit us all at once. If this site was part of a larger network, the central hub could be a place of immense significance, possibly containing answers to all our questions. As we prepared to surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stirred something ancient and powerful. The hum had returned, louder and more insistent, resonating through the water and into our bones. It was as if the lighthouse was waking up, responding to our presence. Back on the boat, we reviewed our findings. The device, the symbols, the map, they all pointed to something much larger than we had anticipated. We knew we had to be careful, not just of the rival group, but of the technology itself. It was clear that we were dealing with forces beyond our comprehension. That evening, as we shared our thoughts and theories, I felt a sense of camaraderie among the team. We were explorers, uncovering a story that had been hidden for centuries. But with every discovery came new questions, and we knew that our journey was far from over. Thanks for coming back for part 4. The discoveries we've made so far have been nothing short of incredible, but they've also led us into a situation more precarious than any of us could have imagined. The weight of our findings was beginning to settle in. We weren't just piecing together ancient history, we were unraveling a puzzle left by beings far beyond our understanding. With the cylindrical device in hand, we returned to our makeshift lab by the coast. We needed to analyze it carefully, but time was not on our side. Rumors of the rival group's proximity were growing. They were shadowy, elusive, and their motivations seemed driven by profit and power. We couldn't let this technology fall into their hands. Dr. Ilara took the lead on examining the device. It was unlike anything we'd seen, sleek and metallic, with markings that matched the symbols we found on the ruins. As she connected it to our diagnostic tools, the device emitted a soft blue light, casting an otherworldly glow around the room. "Let's hope this sheds some light on the situation," Dr. Ilara said with a wry smile, her eyes never leaving the device. As we waited for the results, Liam continued to work on the symbol map, tracing lines and connections between nodes. He theorized that the map might reveal the locations of other similar sites, each potentially housing more technology or clues. Meanwhile, I kept watch, paranoid about the rival group's potential approach. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, made my heart race. We were in a race against time, and the stakes had never been higher. The analysis of the device finally yielded results. It contained complex data streams, possibly messages or instructions encoded in a way that we could only begin to understand. Dr. Ilara's face lit up with excitement. This could be a communication device. It might allow us to contact other nodes or even understand their purpose. If we could unlock this communication, we could unravel the entire network. It was a tantalizing prospect, but also a risky one. We didn't know what kind of response we might trigger. Liam, always the optimist, said, "It's worth a shot. We've come this far. Let's see where this leads." With Dr. Ilara's guidance, we initiated a sequence to decode the messages within the device. As the data began to unfold, it revealed more symbols and patterns, some of which matched constellations we knew. They seemed to point to different locations on Earth, as well as potential destinations beyond our planet. The thought of interstellar travel, of alien visitors who might have once roamed our skies, sent a shiver down my spine. We were on the verge of something monumental, but we needed to be cautious. We were treading into unknown territory. As we continued our work, a sudden disturbance broke the calm. Our equipment began to malfunction, the lights flickering ominously. It was as if the device was responding to our efforts, sending out signals that disrupted everything around us. Liam's face went pale. "I think we've triggered something. We need to shut it down, or we risk exposing ourselves to anyone listening." We scrambled to contain the situation, disconnecting the device and stabilizing our systems. The lights returned to normal, but the air was thick with tension. We had stirred the hornet's nest, and now we had to prepare for the consequences. Dr. Ilara took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We've come too far to stop now. We need to figure out the next steps and secure our findings. We can't let them fall into the wrong hands." The rival group was closing in, and we knew we had to act fast. Our plan was to move our operation to a safer location, away from prying eyes. But as we packed up our equipment, we knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger. Our journey into the heart of the alien lighthouse had brought us closer than ever to uncovering its secrets, but it had also put us at risk, and the challenges we faced were only just beginning. We were determined to see this through, no matter the cost. Hey Reddit, thanks for sticking with me through this wild journey. We've reached the final chapter of our exploration of the mysterious Lighthouse of Alexandria and its alien secrets. After our near miss with the device's unexpected activation, we knew we had to act quickly to protect our discoveries from the rival group and uncover the truth behind the alien network. With the data from the cylindrical device safely backed up, we relocated our operation to a secluded villa further down the coast. It was a tense move, but we managed to stay under the radar. The villa was a quiet place, surrounded by lush greenery and overlooking the vast Mediterranean Sea, providing a perfect hideaway for the work we needed to do. Once settled, we regrouped to focus on the messages within the device. With Liam's decoding skills, we realized that the messages contained layers of information, coordinates, perhaps, but also something more profound. It was as if the device held a key to activating or aligning with the network nodes around the world. "We might be able to communicate with the network," Liam said, his eyes alight with excitement. "If we can send a signal through this device, we could confirm our theories and maybe even get a response." Dr. Ilara was cautious but intrigued. "We must be careful. This is uncharted territory, but if we succeed, it could change everything we know about our history." As we worked to prepare the device for transmission, I kept an eye on our surroundings. The sense of being watched had never really left me, and I knew that the rival group wouldn't give up easily. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made me jump, but I pushed my fear aside. We had a mission, and we were determined to see it through. Finally, the moment came. With the device calibrated, we sent out a signal, a simple pulsing sequence based on the patterns we had deciphered. For a moment, nothing happened, and I felt a wave of doubt wash over me. But then the device responded, glowing brighter and emitting a low hum. The air seemed to vibrate around us, and the sky above the sea shimmered as if in response. We watched in awe as the signals echoed outwards, connecting with the nodes on the map. It was a breathtaking sight, like watching constellations come alive, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of connection to something far greater than myself. As the transmission continued, the device revealed its final secret, a projection of a map showing not only the Earth but also several other points of interest beyond our solar system. It was a glimpse into a vast network that spanned the stars, suggesting that Earth was just one part of a much larger cosmic tapestry. The realization hit us all at once. The Lighthouse of Alexandria wasn't just a beacon for ships. It was a gateway, part of a navigation system designed to guide travelers across the universe. The thought was humbling and exhilarating, a reminder of how small we are in the grand scheme of things. But our celebration was short-lived. A commotion outside the villa snapped us back to reality. The rival group had found us, and they were closing in. We quickly gathered our equipment, determined to protect the device and our findings at all costs. In a tense standoff, Dr. Ilara stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "We have documented everything," she announced, holding up a flash drive. "If you think you can take this technology for yourselves, you're mistaken. The truth will come out, and the world will know." Her confidence gave us strength, and the rival group hesitated, uncertain of their next move. In that moment of uncertainty, we made our escape, slipping away through a hidden path that led to the coast. As we fled, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. We had uncovered something incredible, something that had the power to change the course of history. And while we didn't have all the answers, we had taken the first step in understanding a mystery that had lain dormant for centuries. In the days that followed, we shared our findings with trusted colleagues and allies, ensuring that the knowledge we had gained would be preserved and studied. The world was not yet ready to fully comprehend the implications, but we knew that our journey was only the beginning. The alien network and the lighthouse of Alexandria remained, their secrets still waiting to be discovered. But for now, we had done our part, and I felt a sense of peace knowing that we had safeguarded a piece of history that might one day illuminate the path to the stars. Thanks for following along, Reddit. This journey has been more than I ever imagined, and I'm grateful to have shared it with you. Who knows what other mysteries are out there waiting to be uncovered? Until next time, keep exploring the unknown. If you've ever been down the rabbit hole of the internet, you know that some things can't be unseen. I'd always been fascinated by conspiracy theories and unsolved mysteries, so the dark web seemed like the perfect place to satiate my curiosity. I was in way over my head, of course, but sometimes that's where the real stories are found. It was an ordinary Friday night when I stumbled upon a forum that claimed to reveal the truth about historical monuments. Most of the threads were the usual nonsense, but one post caught my eye. Images leaked, alien ruins beneath the Taj Mahal. The title alone was enough to pull me in. The post contained a series of images supposedly taken by a group of rogue archaeologists who had secretly explored beneath the Taj Mahal. They claimed that the mausoleum was built over an ancient alien city, its architecture inspired by what lay beneath. I was skeptical, but the photos were surprisingly convincing. They depicted vast underground chambers filled with bizarre symbols and structures that defied explanation. Some images showed tunnels leading to a massive metallic object, half-buried and ancient-looking, that could only be described as an alien ship. Intrigued and a bit excited, I saved the images and read through the comments. People speculated wildly about what the discovery could mean, some even suggesting that it held the key to advanced technology. One user, who went by the name Deep Digger, claimed to be part of the original expedition. He wrote that the site was like nothing they'd ever seen and hinted that the knowledge within could change the world forever. A few days passed, and I couldn't shake the idea of those tunnels beneath the Taj Mahal, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I booked a ticket to India. It was a crazy plan, and I knew it, but the lure of uncovering a secret history was too strong to resist. Arriving in Agra, I was struck by the majestic beauty of the Taj Mahal. It's one thing to see it in pictures, but in person it's breathtaking. I spent a day acting like a regular tourist, all the while trying to figure out how to find those alleged tunnels. The next step was to contact Deep Digger. I messaged him through the forum explaining that I was interested in investigating the site further. To my surprise, he replied, giving me cryptic instructions on how to access the tunnels. It involved sneaking into a restricted area at night, which sounded incredibly risky. Still, my curiosity pushed me forward. The following night, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my phone for documentation, I made my way to the spot Deep Digger had described. It was hidden behind a grove of trees on the outskirts of the Taj Mahal grounds. I found the entrance, a small hatch camouflaged with dirt and leaves. My heart was pounding as I pried it open and descended a rusty ladder into the darkness. The air was cool and smelled of earth. The passage was narrow and twisted, but after a few minutes, it opened into a larger corridor. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that matched those in the photos. I was in the right place. As I ventured further, the reality of my situation hit me. I was alone, underneath one of the most iconic structures in the world, about to uncover a secret that had been hidden for centuries. The weight of it all was exhilarating. After what felt like an eternity, I reached a massive chamber. It was just like the images, towering structures and glowing crystals that pulsed with an eerie light. In the center, half buried in the rock, was the alien ship. Its surface was smooth and metallic, with markings that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. I stood there, awestruck and utterly speechless. This was the proof that the world had been waiting for, and I was standing in the midst of it. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I wasn't the only one who knew about this place. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, a sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps. My heart leaped into my throat as I swung my flashlight towards the source. There, in the entrance, stood a group of figures dressed in dark clothing. They had the look of professionals, and I had no doubt that they weren't here by accident. I quickly turned off my flashlight and ducked behind a column, watching as they moved with purpose towards the ship. They carried equipment and spoke in hushed tones, clearly familiar with the area. I realized with a sinking feeling that these were no mere explorers. They were here for the same reason I was, and they wouldn't take kindly to an uninvited guest. I stayed hidden, hardly daring to breathe, as they conducted their business. It was clear they were taking readings and samples, likely to unlock whatever secrets the ship held. The implications were staggering, but I knew I had to stay quiet and unnoticed. As they began to pack up and leave, one of them paused, turning towards where I was hiding. My heart nearly stopped as the figure lingered, but then another called out, and they resumed their exit. I waited until their footsteps faded before I dared to move. Once the coast was clear, I took a few hasty photos with my phone and retraced my steps back to the surface. My mind was racing with possibilities. What I had seen was nothing short of extraordinary, but it also raised more questions than it answered. Back in my hotel room, I reviewed the images and tried to make sense of it all. Was the world ready for this revelation? What were the consequences of such a discovery? More importantly, who were those people, and what did they plan to do with the technology? As I pondered these questions, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep this to myself. The world needed to know, but I had to be careful. The wrong move could put me in danger, or worse, lead to the exploitation of something that should belong to all of humanity. With these thoughts swirling in my head, I sat down at my computer and began to write. This was just the beginning, and I had a feeling the journey ahead would be more challenging and dangerous than anything I'd ever imagined. But sometimes, the pursuit of truth is worth any risk. I spent the next few days trying to piece together everything I had learned. The photos I had taken were incredible, but sharing them openly felt risky. It was clear from the encounter in the tunnels that I wasn't the only one interested in the alien ruins. And whoever those people were, they likely had resources and connections I couldn't match. I decided to reach out to Deep Digger again, hoping he could shed some light on what I had witnessed. He responded with a surprising sense of urgency, suggesting we meet in person to discuss everything I'd seen. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in a quiet part of town. When I arrived, Deep Digger, whose real name was Raj, was already there, nervously sipping his coffee. He was older than I expected, with graying hair and a thoughtful expression. We exchanged brief pleasantries before diving into the subject that had brought us together. Raj explained that the site beneath the Taj Mahal had been known to a select few for decades, kept secret due to the potential consequences of such a discovery. The ship, he said quietly, is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It has the power to change the world, but in the wrong hands, it could lead to unimaginable chaos. He told me that the people I had seen in the chamber were likely part of a clandestine organization, possibly backed by powerful governments, seeking to exploit the technology for their own ends. Their presence was a sign that the secret was slipping out, and soon the whole world would know. I listened, captivated by his words and the gravity of the situation. Raj believed that the technology could benefit humanity, but only if it was handled with care and transparency. He warned me that revealing what I knew would put me at risk, as those seeking to control the discovery wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who stood in their way. The deeper I dug, the more I realized the importance of getting this right. I needed to understand the full scope of what was at stake, not just for myself, but for humanity as a whole. The technology could lead to unprecedented advancements in energy, medicine, and communication, but it could also bring about conflict and power struggles if not handled wisely. One evening, while reviewing my notes in my hotel room, my phone buzzed with a message from Raj. It was a single line. "They know you've been in the tunnels. Be careful." The warning sent a chill down my spine, a stark reminder of the risks involved. But it also solidified my resolve. I couldn't turn back now, not when I was so close to the truth. It was time to take the next step, whatever that might be. I knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to see it through. With the world on the brink of discovering something monumental, the choice was clear. I had to act, and I had to do it soon. After receiving Raj's ominous message, I knew I had to be cautious. The risks were higher than ever, and I had to think carefully about my next move. I spent the next few days laying low, pretending to be an ordinary tourist while discreetly gathering more information. I decided to focus on identifying the mysterious group I had seen in the tunnels. They seemed organized and well-equipped, which suggested a high level of backing. It was clear they had a vested interest in the alien technology, but the question was, what did they plan to do with it? I began my search online, looking for any mention of similar discoveries or organizations involved in such activities. The dark web, as always, was a trove of information for those who knew where to look. I found discussions and forums speculating about secret projects and shadowy agencies, but nothing concrete. While researching, I stumbled upon a website that claimed to expose classified information from various countries. Most of it was far-fetched, but one thread caught my attention. It described a covert operation known as Project Horizon, supposedly tasked with acquiring and studying alien technology. The project was rumored to be a joint venture between several global powers, all vying for control of what lay beneath the Taj Mahal. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this was the group I had encountered. If they were indeed behind the operation, it meant I was up against some of the most powerful forces in the world. It was a daunting realization, but it also fueled my determination to ensure the discovery benefited everyone. Armed with this new information, I contacted Raj to discuss our next steps. We agreed that bringing in trusted allies was crucial. He suggested reaching out to an old friend of his, a respected archaeologist with a reputation for integrity. Dr. Meera Patel had worked on various high-profile digs and was known for her commitment to preserving history. Raj arranged a meeting with Dr. Patel at her home, a modest bungalow on the outskirts of Agra. She greeted us warmly and listened intently as we explained the situation. Her eyes widened with interest and concern as we detailed our findings and the potential implications of the alien technology. Dr. Patel was skeptical at first, but the evidence we presented was compelling. She agreed to help us, promising to connect us with scientists and historians who could evaluate the discovery without bias. She also warned us about the dangers of exposing such a secret, emphasizing the need for a careful and measured approach. With Dr. Patel on board, we devised a plan to document the ruins more thoroughly. We would gather as much data as possible, photos, videos, and samples, before determining the best way to reveal the information to the world. It was a risky endeavor, but with Dr. Patel's expertise and contacts, we felt more confident in our ability to handle the situation. As night fell, we prepared for another descent into the tunnels. This time, I was accompanied by Raj and Dr. Patel, both equipped with professional gear for documentation. We made our way to the hidden entrance, our hearts pounding with anticipation and a hint of fear. Once inside, we moved quickly through the familiar passages, retracing my steps from before. The chamber was just as awe-inspiring as I remembered, its alien architecture casting strange shadows in the dim light. Dr. Patel was visibly impressed, her expression a mix of wonder and disbelief. We spent hours meticulously recording every detail of the site, capturing images of the ship and its surroundings. Dr. Patel took notes, sketching the symbols on the walls and collecting samples for analysis. It was exhilarating to be part of something so monumental, knowing we were uncovering a piece of history that had remained hidden for centuries. However, our work was not without challenges. At one point, we heard voices echoing through the tunnels, footsteps approaching from the direction of the entrance. My heart raced as we extinguished our lights, ducking behind the ship for cover. The voices grew louder, accompanied by the sound of equipment being set up. It was clear that another team was entering the chamber, possibly the same group I had encountered before. We held our breath, hoping they wouldn't discover our presence. Minutes felt like hours as we waited in silence, our nerves stretched to the breaking point. Eventually, the voices faded, and we dared to peek out from our hiding place. The newcomers were focused on their own task, seemingly unaware of our intrusion. Realizing we had limited time, we continued our work with renewed urgency. Every second counted, and we needed to gather as much information as possible before making our escape. It was a tense but exhilarating experience, knowing we were on the brink of uncovering something that could change the world. Once we had what we needed, we quietly retraced our steps, slipping away undetected. The sense of relief was overwhelming as we emerged into the cool night air, our hearts still pounding from the adrenaline rush. Back at Dr. Patel's bungalow, we reviewed our findings, marveling at the sheer scope of what we had documented. The images and data were invaluable, providing a comprehensive picture of the alien ruins and their potential significance. As we sat together, discussing our next steps, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the journey we were on. We were standing at the edge of a new era, one that could redefine humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But with that knowledge came great responsibility, and we were determined to ensure that the truth would be revealed in a way that benefited all of humankind. Our path was fraught with challenges, but I knew we were up to the task. Together, we would navigate the complexities of this discovery, shining a light on the secrets hidden beneath the Taj Mahal and unlocking the potential of an ancient civilization long forgotten. The world was about to change, and we were ready to lead the way. With our documentation in hand, we knew we had to proceed carefully. The stakes were higher than ever, and we were aware that one wrong move could compromise everything. Our goal was to ensure that this discovery reached the right people who would handle it responsibly. Dr. Patel began reaching out to her network of trusted colleagues, selecting individuals known for their integrity and dedication to science. She emphasized the need for discretion, explaining the sensitive nature of our findings. As expected, not everyone she contacted was willing to get involved, given the potential risks and the power dynamics at play. However, a few brave souls agreed to join us, forming a small but formidable team committed to unveiling the truth. Meanwhile, I kept a low profile, careful not to draw attention to myself or my involvement in the project. Raj and I maintained regular communication, using encrypted messages to avoid detection. We also set up secure channels to share our data with the team, ensuring that the information remained safe from prying eyes. Despite our precautions, the pressure was mounting. The sense of urgency was palpable, and we all felt the weight of our responsibility. Our discovery could change the course of history, and we had to be meticulous in how we handled it. As we worked behind the scenes, news of the alien ruins began to spread in whispers across online forums and conspiracy sites. Rumors swirled, fueled by snippets of information and speculation from various sources. It was both exciting and nerve-wracking to see the world slowly catching wind of what lay beneath the Taj Mahal. One evening, while reviewing our latest findings, Raj received a call from an unexpected source. A journalist named Annika Mehta had somehow caught wind of our work and wanted to meet with us. She was known for her investigative reporting and had a reputation for exposing corruption and hidden truths. Raj was initially wary but sensed that she might be an ally in our mission to bring the discovery to light. We arranged to meet Annika at a discreet location, a cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet part of town. She arrived promptly, her demeanor professional yet approachable. After brief introduction, she got straight to the point. "I've heard whispers about what you found beneath the Taj Mahal," Annika said, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. "If there's any truth to it, the world deserves to know. But I understand the risks involved, and I want to help you tell the story the right way." Her sincerity was reassuring, and we spent the next few hours discussing the details of our findings and our plans for revealing the truth. Annika was thoughtful and insightful, asking the right questions and offering valuable perspectives on how to handle the situation delicately. We shared our documentation with her, confident that she would approach the story with integrity and sensitivity. Annika agreed to work with us, promising to craft a series of articles that would educate the public about the discovery while emphasizing its significance and the need for responsible stewardship. As we continued to collaborate, Annika introduced us to additional contacts in the media and scientific communities. Her connections proved invaluable, helping us build a broader coalition of experts and advocates who supported our mission. Our small team was growing, and with each new ally, we felt more equipped to handle the challenges ahead. Despite our progress, we remained vigilant. The presence of the shadowy organization we had encountered in the tunnels loomed large, and we knew they wouldn't take kindly to our efforts. We had to stay one step ahead, anticipating their moves and protecting our work from interference. One night, as I was preparing to meet with Raj and Dr. Patel, I received an unexpected message from an anonymous source. The message was cryptic, but seemed to imply that there was more to the ruins than we realized. It hinted at a hidden chamber within the site, containing information that could unlock the full potential of the alien technology. Intrigued and cautious, I shared the message with Raj and Dr. Patel. We debated the credibility of the information and the risks involved in investigating further. Ultimately, curiosity and the desire to uncover the truth won out, and we decided to return to the tunnels once more. This time, we were accompanied by a few trusted members of our growing team, including Annika, who wanted to witness the discovery firsthand. We entered the tunnels under the cover of darkness, our nerves tingling with anticipation. As we navigated the familiar passages, we searched for any signs of the rumored hidden chamber. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon a narrow corridor that seemed out of place. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings that pulsed faintly with a soft, luminescent glow. We followed the corridor, our flashlights illuminating the way. At the end, we found a concealed door, almost imperceptible against the stone. With a sense of awe and trepidation, we pushed it open, revealing a chamber unlike anything we had seen before. Inside, the room was filled with strange artifacts and what appeared to be advanced machinery. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a small, shimmering object that seemed to pulse with energy. It was as if the very air hummed with potential, and we couldn't help but feel that we had uncovered something truly extraordinary. Our discovery raised more questions than answers, but it also offered a glimpse into the possibilities that lay ahead. The chamber held the key to understanding the alien technology, and we were determined to unlock its secrets. As we stood in that remarkable space, surrounded by wonders beyond our comprehension, we knew that our journey was far from over. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but we were ready to face them head-on. With the truth within our grasp, we were more determined than ever to ensure that this discovery would benefit all of humanity. The hidden chamber was a revelation. The artifacts and machinery inside seemed to defy explanation, embodying a level of sophistication that was both mesmerizing and intimidating. We all knew we were standing on the brink of a monumental discovery, one that had the potential to reshape our understanding of technology and history. Our team worked diligently, documenting every aspect of the chamber and its contents. Dr. Patel and the other scientists meticulously analyzed the artifacts, trying to decipher their purpose and function. Annika took notes and gathered information for her articles, ensuring that the story would be told with accuracy and depth. The shimmering object on the pedestal drew particular attention. It emitted a soft glow and seemed to respond to touch, pulsing gently when interacted with. Raj hypothesized that it might be some form of power source or key, integral to unlocking the full potential of the alien technology. We were cautious in our examination, aware of the importance of understanding it fully before attempting any drastic actions. As the days passed, our team grew more cohesive and focused. We shared a sense of purpose, driven by the knowledge that what we were uncovering could change the world. Yet we also understood the need for caution. The shadowy organization was still out there, undoubtedly monitoring our activities and waiting for an opportunity to intervene. With the help of Annika's media contacts, we planned a strategic release of information. The goal was to ensure that the public was informed and engaged, fostering a sense of collective responsibility for the discovery. We wanted to prevent any single entity from monopolizing the technology and using it for selfish or destructive purposes. The day of the release arrived with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Annika's first article was published online, accompanied by a selection of the photos and data we had gathered. It was a carefully crafted piece, designed to capture the imagination of readers while emphasizing the importance of handling the discovery with care. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, the story went viral, sparking discussions and debates across the globe. People were fascinated by the idea of alien ruins beneath the Taj Mahal and the implications of such a discovery. Scientists, historians, and technologists weighed in, offering insights and theories about what the technology could mean for humanity. Our team watched the unfolding events with a sense of relief and accomplishment. We had succeeded in bringing the truth to light, and the world was taking notice. However, we also remained vigilant, aware that not everyone would be pleased with our actions. As expected, the shadowy organization made its presence known. Attempts were made to discredit our findings, labeling them as fabrications or exaggerations. But the evidence was compelling, and the public had already embraced the story. Efforts to suppress the information only fueled further interest and curiosity. In the weeks that followed, international agencies began to take an interest in the site beneath the Taj Mahal. Governments and scientific bodies initiated investigations, eager to understand and harness the technology. Our team worked closely with these groups, advocating for transparency and ethical use of the discovery. Amidst the flurry of activity, we continued our research in the hidden chamber, determined to unlock its secrets. The shimmering object on the pedestal remained a mystery, but we were making progress. It seemed to hold a wealth of information, possibly a database or guide to the alien technology. With each new insight, we grew more excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. As the world adjusted to the reality of the discovery, a sense of optimism began to emerge. The potential for advancement was immense, and there was hope that the technology could be used to address some of humanity's greatest challenges. Energy, medicine, communication. Every field stood to benefit from the knowledge we were uncovering. Reflecting on the journey, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the team and the shared commitment that had brought us this far. We had faced numerous obstacles and risks, but the rewards were worth it. The truth was out, and the world was poised to embark on a new chapter of understanding and progress. Standing in the chamber one last time, I marveled at how far we had come. The ruins beneath the Taj Mahal were a testament to the mysteries that still lay hidden in the world, waiting to be discovered. Our journey had only just begun, and I was excited to see where it would lead. With renewed determination, we continued our work, confident that the path we had chosen would lead to a brighter and more informed future for all of humanity. The story of the alien ruins was just the beginning, and I knew that our efforts would inspire others to explore, discover, and share the wonders of our universe.